Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about Franz Welser-Möst's Mahler 9 with the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, this is a streaming release that you can get on various services. I heard it from Apple Music, or you can get it from iTunes or other places. I've seen it around. It's easy enough to hear, but the question is, do you want to? Well, I don't think so. It's so terminally bland. I mean, that's all there is to say about it. That's it. I can finish now. No, but seriously, what fascinates me about the Vienna Philharmonic is that it's supposed to be the Mahler orchestra, and all that nonsense. They've never done a great Mahler ninth. And you would think that this is an orchestra that could really do a Mahler ninth. I mean, it's a string-based, rich, sort of really feeds into what their strengths are, I think. I mean, they've never had one of the world's great woodwind sections. The horns are marvelous, but the trumpets and trombones, it's the kind of symphony that they should just have for lunch. And they never have. They just never have. And so, it doesn't surprise me that this is not a great Mahler ninth. But what does surprise me is just how faceless the whole thing is. Everything about it sounds rushed. From the very, very start, Welser-Möst seems to be pushing the tempos. And you can do it. The timings are quite similar, for example, to like Bruno Walter's second Mahler ninth. That sort of flowing, not hugely demonstrative, not emotionally hysterical kind of Mahler ninth. And that's okay. It can work that way, but not when everything is just so under-characterized. See, Bruno Walter, at the climax of the first movement, for example, that big collapse. I mean, he's got a big collapse and tam-tam crash, and he lets the brass cut. Here, there's none of that. There's just none of that. They play well, of course. They have the notes, but, it all just has an unruffled surface about it, and the details aren't particularly well captured, and there aren't moments where you just go, aha, something's happening here that's expressively meaningful. The second movement, it should sound so clunky, and there's a tendency these days, I understand, to exaggerate it terribly for the woodwinds to go, you could do silly things. You really can. But the problem here is one of proportion and tempo. Welser-Möst begins that first dance so quickly. Like I said, he's always pushing forward that when you get the waltz, which is supposed to steadily accelerate, there isn't any room for it to do that. It doesn't have the contrast that you need between sections. The same thing is true of the rondo burlesque. At the very end, where Mahler writes più stretto, he wants it to go faster. He wants you to push to the end. There's nowhere to accelerate. They can't play it any faster than they're already going. And so as a result, it actually seems to slow down. I mean, it's a very subjective impression, but you don't get any sense of increasing urgency. And as for the adagio, the last movement, well, you can stretch it out to half an hour. Welser-Möst brings it in under 22 minutes. That is amazingly quick these days. And like I said, it's similar to what the early Mahler interpreters used to do, or the earlier Mahler interpreters like Bruno Walter. Even Leonard Bernstein's first recording was like 23 minutes. Scholte's was around there too. That's sort of what people did. Since then, they've been getting longer and slower. And in particular, there's been an effort to try and equalize the timings of the first and last movements to make the finale not seem anticlimactic, to sort of stretch it out and give it more weight, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with the way Welser-Möst wants to do it. What's wrong in terms of like overall speed, what's wrong is just the lack of emphasis, of accent, of big moments, of points of rhetorical emphasis. All of those things, they just go for nothing. And I don't understand why. I really don't. I mean, he knows the work. I mean, he clearly understands what's going on there. I mean, you can tell that there's, he gets them to play well. It's his conception of the piece. But boy, I mean, I suppose if you went to see it live as a typical subscription concert sort of event, you might leave saying, oh, that was nice. But who cares? I mean, that's the real point. Who cares? Who needs another Mahler ninth that's just bland and uninteresting? I mean, it's decent. It's well played. It's the Vienna Philharmonic. Big deal. Whoop-de-doo. I mean, there are just too many wonderful performances of the Mahler Ninth for us to have to put up with something which is just average. Everything about it is just average. And who needs average? We have better things to do with our time. And I suggest we do better things. So keep on listening, friends. Thank you for joining me. Take care.